Hello, everyone. I'm Erin, aka Breakfast Candy, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our Level Up workshop on Season Pass Balance, hosted by Roblox's own Game Insights game designer, Dan Spaventa. Take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Erin, and welcome everybody. We have an exciting workshop for you today, very dense with a lot of things that we want to cover. And ultimately, the goal for this workshop is to hopefully bring to light how approachable economy and system design actually is. You know, I always think about Roblox as democratizing game development. And really my goal with this workshop today is to democratize systems design as well, because I think a lot of people overcomplicate it and overthink what it actually is. Like I said, we have a lot to get to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to hop in. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be covering a season pass feature and how I, a systems designer, would balance this feature. But first, I want to walk through very briefly what a season pass system is, because in talking to a few developers before this event, I realized there's a lot of different ideas of what a season pass actually is. So we're going to go through a brief overview, starting with what the heck is a season pass. A season pass is a feature that runs for a set duration of time. It's something that's really nice because you can create it as sort of a meta system in your game where it sort of facilitates that core loop, as I was talking about in my workshop a while ago on game expansions. So in this feature, a player will complete tasks that grants pass XP. And at certain XP thresholds, the player obtains a higher tier on that season pass. When they obtain that higher tier, they'll be rewarded with items. So you could see here on Jailbreak Season Pass, right? They have 10 tiers for you to complete, and they have these rewards that you can obtain as you complete these contracts that they have down here. So their daily rewards or their daily quests that they have are things like, you know, capture criminals or, you know, complete a successful heist, things like that. So they're really just systems that already exist in the game, but they're motivating players to want to do those systems in order to obtain season pass XP, because these season passes have exclusive rewards. As you can see on Jailbreak Season Pass, they have a free track that's available for all players that gives them these really cool and unique rewards, as well as a premium pass where you can spend, in this case, about 300 Robux in order to gain access to these. And when you get access to the premium pass, you're granted all of the rewards for the tiers that you've achieved so far. So why are these a common things that you might see in a lot of games right now? Well, let's go over it. First, as a developer, this allows you to front load your content development. And as Erin painfully knows as a content designer, the name of the game with game development is that you're really just constantly trying to keep up with your players in terms of the content that they're consuming and the content that you're producing. And historically, this has been a rat race where every week you're trying to pump out new content for players to complete. What a season pass does is it allows you to sort of front load a lot of that work, such that once you release it into the wild, it sort of paces your players over time so that they could slowly achieve those things, and gives your team enough time to both develop the next season pass that you're going to be working on, as well as those really cool and unique and awesome features that ultimately your team wants to work on, and they're going to grow your game to an even wider audience. There's several sort of benefits to this, right? First, it's going to drive some monetization with the season pass, right? So we have this down here. And for a lot of players, there's a fear of missing out. They really want to achieve all of the items in the game, flex to other players how long they've been playing the game and some of the cool items that they've gotten along the way. So that facilitates monetization, which is obviously healthy for the business. It motivates player retention because, as I said, you're pacing their progress over time. There's only a certain amount of dailies that they can complete every day, and therefore a certain amount of progress that they can make every day on this season pass. So this motivates players to want to come back tomorrow, a week from now, even throughout the month, so that they can achieve all of the things that they want to achieve with the season pass. And it also drives player engagement because you're motivating your players to want to play systems that maybe they didn't necessarily think about doing before. So you're providing the opportunity for your players to experience all of the cool and unique content that you've created in your game. So we have this really cool season pass wireframe that Erin put together. And we're also going to go through a design document real quick after this. But real quick, Erin, did you want to hop in here and talk about what we're taking a look at here?
Sure thing, Dan. So like the jailbreak example that you gave, we have 2 passes, a free pass and a premium pass. Players earn XP by completing missions, and that allows them to make progress through the tiers. And when they do so and complete a tier, they can claim rewards for that tier. Now note that this player only has the free pass unlocked. But once they do unlock the premium pass, they can go back and claim rewards for the tiers that they have already completed. And they can do that at any point that they unlock that premium pass, even if they wait till the last minute. And the goal is to not penalize players for waiting to buy that pass.
That's right. So just to reiterate, you can see this person here has done 2 of these tiers so far, right? They go and click on the upgrade button and all of the things. Well, in this case, they've completed 5 tiers, but all of those are available to collect. So you want to definitely avoid the negative experience of making them grind again for the premium stuff.
Right. And then after that, go back one more.
Sure.
After that, anytime that they complete a tier, they get the rewards for both passes.
And Erin, why don't we just grant those items to them right away as soon as they obtain the tier? Why do we motivate them to want to go and check out the season pass UI and actually claim those rewards?
Sure, you can grant those rewards automatically, but one of the things that you can run into is players don't realize that they received those rewards in the background, or they're unclear why they received the rewards that they did. So by making them come in and claim those rewards, not only are you driving them back into the system and making them aware of the system again and again and again, but you're also making sure that they know exactly what they got and why.
Awesome. Final mock-up I believe we have here. What are we looking at here, Erin?
Right, so this player has worked really hard throughout the season and completed every tier, and they have claimed all of the rewards. Now, you'll notice this reward here in the free pass for tier 10 looks very different from the others. The rest of these are maybe currencies or other items like that, but this is a special item. You can choose to put your big special item, either the free pass or the premium pass, or maybe even have a special item that's unique to both. But the idea is that you have this item that is, really motivating for players to drive them throughout the season. And awesome. That is the final reward.
Yeah, I believe we saw that here on Jailbreak, right? Like a skin is pretty cool, right? Or a bookshelf, but I want the skull car. That definitely looks the coolest. So as a player, I'm definitely going to be motivated to sort of drive towards getting that item. Awesome. So with that, we're going to move over to a design document, and we're going to talk about that for a little bit. So for me personally, this is a common question I get from a lot of developers that I work with, like, hey, should I use a design document? What are they for? What is the purpose? Why wouldn't I just start developing things in the game rather than waste my time writing this out on, a Google sheet or something? Erin, again, has put together one of these as our resident expert content designer. So I'm going to let her drive this one. Erin, do you want to walk us through this design document and, some of the stuff that's in it, as well as why we put together the things that we do for this?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of thoughts on what should go into a design document. And some of those are for entire game. This one is just for a specific feature in your game. So these are the sections that I thought would be the most important, starting with an overview that allows people who are reading your document to get a very quick understanding of the system that you're going to be outlining in more detail. Next are goals. And these are the designer's goals for the feature in terms of what kind of experience we want the players to receive, what we want them to feel, what we want them to get and experience as they're going through the system. And it's important to include these because everyone who on your team is working on this system needs to be informed about the vision that you have. And from the artist who's designing the art to the coder who is implementing it, everyone contributes to that overall experience. So it's really important that you communicate that to your team. All
right, moving on. Why do we put together a user interface preview?
Yeah, so just as a designer, it's really useful for me to sketch out what that system might look like, just for my own ability to make sure that I'm covering all the bases, that there's nothing I'm forgetting, that I'm really thinking about how the player is interacting with the system. So it's something I do for myself anyway, but I also like to include it in design documents because it really helps for team members to be able to have a visual of what you're talking about, not just text, which they can gloss over, they get bored, or just
Right.
misinterpret. It's really hard to do that when you have visuals included as well.
That's right. We always say the golden rule of game design is people don't read. So sometimes it's nice to have an image to back up the words that maybe their eyes gloss over while reading, for sure. All right. Next, a section we're heavily going to be using today as a systems designer on the team, but not to steal your thunder, Aaron. Why do we put together rules for a feature?
Yeah, so this is where the nitty-gritty design work happens. This is where you're defining, really what is happening with the system, how the player interacts with it, what happens when they interact with it, all of the edge cases that you're defining. And the goal of this is just to be able to hand this to your systems designer and your coders and have them just instantly understand and not have a lot of questions and come back and go back and forth, or, make things up on their own that maybe necessarily don't match the goals. So this is really a conversation between the designers and the coders about how the system should work. And it's documented, it's the source of truth, so everybody knows exactly what to do.
Right, right. If you've done this successfully, this essentially for me as a systems designer, and definitely for programmers as well, becomes basically a blueprint that you can use line by line to build out your feature. And even in the exercise of writing it down, right, Aaron? There's a lot of things that you sort of tease out or you didn't consider. And so in this way, writing it down on a piece of paper facilitates that conversation, because you have to be like, oh, I didn't really think about that. Okay. Hey, programmer. Hey, systems designer, let's huddle together. How are we going to solve this problem? Right. And once you have those conversations, then you can record it here. And now in the middle of development, you don't have to disrupt the programmer's workflow or the systems designer's workflow. They could just read through this line by line and build out their feature, as you're going to see in a couple of minutes once we get to our season pass balance. All right, moving on. Let's talk about, let's see, more rules. How about examples? Why do we put examples in here?
Yeah, so this is also another thing that's just useful for the content designer who's going to be coming up with these missions, to have an idea of the kinds of things that missions will be built around. To make sure that, for example, I'm hitting all of the systems in the game so that we're really driving that engagement. It's also really useful for our coders to, understand the kinds of things that we're going to be asking for. Even though this isn't a complete list, it does give them some idea of how they should structure the missions as they are building them.
Right. And sometimes with the rules, it can get a little verbose. So once you get to the missions and you're giving some examples, then for some readers, you can be like, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. Surfacing. Why do we care about this, Aaron?
So you can make a perfect, beautiful, awesome, really engaging system, but if your players can't find it, if they don't know where it lives in the UI, if they don't see it, they're not going to engage with it. So surfacing is really important. So really think about how you're presenting this to your players, where it's living in your UI, and how easy is it for them to access it.
Exactly. All right. Also very important and often overlooked, as I've experienced, asset requests and similar tech requests. Why do these exist in this design document?
So this is really a courtesy to your team members to say, you've read the design document, presumably, but this is really important for you as well. And you can jump straight to this section and see, here's my idea of the kinds of things that I'm going to be asking of you as an artist, as a programmer, in order to complete the system. And these are things that aren't a complete list again, but can give them an idea of the scope of the work, who should be assigned to work on it, things like that. It's really important for your team management and scheduling.
Right. And, there's a common thread here, right? Which is for all of these sections, we're really trying to facilitate team conversation to make sure everybody's 100% aligned on what this feature is and how we're building it, right? Okay. And finally, last section we'll cover future updates, all of our hopes and dreams. Why are they in this document?
Yeah, so when you're designing a system and you've got a schedule to keep, sometimes you have to go with maybe your minimum viable product. It's not your complete vision for the system, or there are things that are just you anticipate down the road they'll be nice to have to make the experience better for players, but you don't really have time for them now, or they would make a really great, exciting update later. So that's what future updates is for. That allows you to kind of collect all those ideas so they don't get missing. You don't forget about them. And so you just have some idea of where the system could go, because it's important when you release a new system in your game that you continue to support it and refresh it and reinvigorate it, so that it stays something that's engaging for the players.
That's a great point. And, I just want to double down on that. I love that you brought that up. You shouldn't be thinking about a system for just this release, right? You should be thinking, what is it a month, a year from now, even right now in the ideation phase, right? Yeah, so that's a great point. Okay, we got a lot to cover, so let's move on. Thank you, Aaron, for putting this together. And now we're going to get into the meat of this today, which is that I, as a systems designer, am going to walk you through step by step how I balance a season pass system. Now that you understand it, and we have this awesome design document, which our content designer have handed off, now it's our responsibility to play around in Sheets or in Excel and figure out what should the balance of this feature be. So for those at home who are watching this as a recording later, you are 100% going to need this season pass materials document that we've provided for you in order to do this exercise with me. So if you don't have it ready, please pause the video, get that ready, and we'll get started. For those of you who are watching this live, the first step that we're going to need is we're going to need to start a new spreadsheet here. So you go to File, New Spreadsheet, as I just did there. And what we're going to do is we're going to import that document that we sent out. So you're going to go to File, you're going to go to Import, and we're going to look on our computer for that file. I conveniently have it here, Season Pass Materials. You're going to go ahead and upload it here, and you're going to import that data, and you're going to replace this spreadsheet. So what you should see is this document here. And just to double check and make sure that we have everything, there are 3 tabs in this document that you 100% need. First is our player profiles sheet here, this tab down here. You should definitely have this. The second one is a glossary. So I'm going to give you a mini Sheets/Excel lesson here before we get started on actually balancing our feature. So this will be a useful point of reference for you as we put this together. And finally, to really nerd out, we have a curve generator just to help you out with some of the math later on so that this doesn't devolve into some math lesson. All right. So once you have that all together, we are ready to get started. And for me as a systems designer, the first thing that I want to do when I'm planning out and I'm balancing a feature is that I want to put together what I think is the most important part of this document, which is the goals and assumptions tab. So first, to show you how to do that, we're going to go down here. If you're using Google Sheets, there's a plus button at the bottom left here called Add Sheet. We're going to go ahead and click that. And then just to rename that tab, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make this our goals, assumptions, and constants tab. So one thing I briefly glossed over here, but I want to go ahead and show you is this is ultimately what we're going to be putting together today. So I want to show you the sort of finalized product just to give you a visual of where we're working towards today. And functionally, what this is as a systems designer, we're trying to figure out both the balance or the difficulty of this feature as well as the pacing. And I'll explain those in a little bit, but that's really what this sheet is showing you. We're also right now going to be putting together this goals, assumptions, and constants tab. So this is what this is going to look like. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that together first. So going back to our document that we have here, you should have this new tab that you've put together. And then what we are going to do is we're going to go over step by step in our design document, the parts that we're going to need to balance. That's the first thing is we're going to be putting together our goals. So you can think of goals as anything that we want to achieve as a designer for this feature. And the way that we're going to put that together is we're going to both combine what are the asks for the feature by our designer on that feature, as well as what experience we want to create as the systems designer for this feature. So that's the very first thing I always like to put together is my goals. So on our sheet here, you can go ahead and you can click on what I'm going to have here, which is B3, type in goals as our header. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start writing this out. So once you have that together, we're going to start our process of going through this document. Now, the sheet that we sent out isn't going to have this stuff bolded in blue. I just have this here because we need to sort of motor through. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So I'm just highlighting for myself the things that, in theory, if I were going through this document for the first time, would be things that stand out for me that I need to balance. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to read through this document and we're going to highlight the things that we actually need to balance for this feature. So already in our overview section here, there's a few things for me as a systems designer that stand out. First, we say in each month-long season. So that already indicates to me that the team wants this to be a feature that has a 30-day duration. So I'm going to go back to, oops, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to go back to my new sheet that I put together, which is my season pass balance. And the very first goal that my team wants me to accomplish is that this is a feature that lasts for a month, or in our case, for simplicity, 30 days. So this is a 30-day duration feature. So that will be important to know as we're balancing our feature. Okay, so you should have that typed down. We're going to go back to our document and continue to read through for important things to balance. So the next thing that stands out for me is this line here. Players earn XP by completing daily missions to level up through tiers of rewards. So a lot of really dense and important information here. The first thing is players are going to earn experience by completing daily missions. So I want to make sure that I capture that in here. So at certain XP milestones, players progress to the next tier and receive a reward. So that's a very important thing that I want to capture. Okay, moving back to here. The next thing that stands out to me is the very next line. So the premium pass, okay, so this is the first mention of the premium pass in this document, which players pay to unlock. So that's an important thing to understand. Provides bonus missions to get even better rewards. So there's a few important things here. First is there is a premium pass. So premium pass that players will pay for. The second thing that we mentioned in here is that when they unlock it, they're given an additional mission that they can do every day. So this is a very critical piece of information for me as a systems designer. Why? Because now I have one set of players, the players who didn't pay for the premium pass, that are going at one pace of progression. And then I have another group of players, my payers, which are going at a faster progression. So this is an important thing to keep in mind, because when I'm trying to figure out my completion rates for the feature, right, there's two separate paces that my players are going at. So that's very important. So premium players, oops, typo. Premium players will have an additional mission. Okay, there's also another piece of information from here, which is that daily limited, so a limited amount of daily missions are granted to players. So that's an important thing to record. Okay, so that's what stood out to me here. As a systems designer, I'm going to pass over the goals section because this is more for the team vision-wise as they're balancing this feature. I'm going to take a look at this user interface, get an idea for the feature as we talked about, and then I'm going to move down to here, which is the meat of the document that I really want to focus on as a systems designer, which are the rules. And ultimately, you can think of systems design as the rule-defining person for a feature. So starting out, the first thing that's going to pop up for me here is that for the purposes of this exercise, the pass will last for 30 days. I've already captured that. Moving down, the next thing is that for this exercise that we're going to be doing today, our seasons will have 10 tiers. So that's an important thing to capture. 10 tiers of progression. So we're going to capture that. Oops, wrong document. Okay. Moving on, we're going to keep going through here. A few other things for the content designer to note, but not necessarily the most important for us. We're going to scroll through here and we're going to get down to the mission rules section. And the next thing that's going to pop out for me as the systems designer is that free players are going to receive 2 missions a day. So that's very important for me. Free players will have 2 missions a day. Okay. Moving on, again, with our premium players, we said earlier, and we're going to double down here, they're going to get 1 more additional mission a day. So that means that they're going to have 3 in total. So premium players will have 3 missions a day. Okay. Moving on, we're going to take a look here. So the next thing that pops out to me as the systems designer is that we have different difficulties here for our mission balance. So this is going to have some impact, as you're going to see once we get the mission balance later. But typically when the team defines that there are dailies that are easy, medium, and hard, that's typically going to relate more to the amount of time that it's going to take to complete it versus the actual difficulty of the mission itself. Though sometimes there's some crossover there. Maybe for some teams, like if this is an RPG, a hard mission means you have to defeat a boss versus a medium mission, which is just like, defeat 10 enemies or something like that. But regardless, that's an important thing that I want to capture. So easy, medium, and hard missions. Okay. Do we have anything else? I don't think so, but there we go. So that's the very first step that I do, right? I'm taking all of the tidbits for the feature in terms of what are the rules for the feature. And if you're going through and there's some question that isn't answered in the document, that's your opportunity to go to the designer and the team that's working on it and say, hey, so what about this? What is the kind of experience that we want to have here, right? You want to make sure that you clarify all of these things before you even begin balancing the feature, because it's better to know before you start balancing than in the middle and have to redo a bunch of work. That was a lot of talking for me, so I'm going to pause for a minute. Missimo, Aaron, do we have any questions?
We do have some questions, Dan. So our first question is from Chris CJ Oyer.
Sure.
You want to ask your question?
Hey there.
Hey, CJ, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad. I was wondering if, this is back for the design doc stuff, but is there any reason we should use a linear design document over more modular approaches such as web pages, blogs, or Notion with links connecting to relevant pages, or possibly even a more dynamic visual planning tool like Miro?
No, there is no reason to use this over another. Really, it comes down to personal preference. What does your team prefer using? What do they find the most useful visually or, tactically? What makes the most sense for you? You should use that. I happen to use Google Documents just because it's the most readily available for most teams. It's the one I have the most experience on in terms of game development on other projects I've been on. However, if you and your team have found something more useful, by all means, use that instead.
Great, thank you.
Okay, our next question comes from Boat Bomber.
Hello.
Hey.
So my question is, all the season pass features that I've seen implemented in games at this time all have linear progression where you complete challenges to move down the line. What are your thoughts on a tree-based progression where players choose which specific challenges to complete in order to continue down a branch towards a specific prize that they want?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thought. I'd welcome any sort of innovation that you want to try. My initial thoughts for that is that players, obviously, to use a famous adage, want to collect it all, right? And when you force them to choose between which prize they want, there's both this like fear of missing out and this anxiety of choice of, okay, I really want this one versus this one. My recommendation to you, because I said, please try it out and see how it does, is if you're going to do that, provide opportunities in the future for them to get the other rewards if they want to. Like maybe you rehash that season pass at a later date. Like if it's a Halloween season pass, right? Maybe you run it back the next year and you allow them to get the others. Maybe as a premium option, they can get all of the rewards on all of the trees. But just keep that in mind. I think the most critical thing is that, you know, for something where you're presenting all of these rewards for players really just want to collect all of those things at the end of the day. And while it might seem interesting to provide choice for them, the perspective is they have to choose which one they get and they miss out on all the others. And that might create like a negative experience. So those are my thoughts.
Once they complete a branch, it takes them back to the root of the tree so that they can complete the next branch, basically allowing them to have like multiple season passes.
Yeah, that's definitely an option as well. I mean, one implementation I'm seeing out there now is that they actually, with each threshold of tier, allow the players to choose which reward that they want. But ultimately, if a player wants to grind it out completely, they will eventually choose all of the rewards and unlock the next set of rewards that they then can choose through and unlock, etc. So that's definitely an option for this implementation. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Dan. All right. In the interest of time, we're only going to answer one more in this section. And so that is from Chris CJ Oyer again.
CJ's popular. All right, CJ, what do you got for me?
Well, this is actually takes some inspiration from the previous question relating to sort of the non-linearity of progression. And I get, the like-dislike ratio just changed. So now I'm asking my other question. Okay, sorry about that. So should two of the different mission difficulties that you mentioned be kept consistent across platforms, or should an easier variant of each be made available for mobile users?
Yeah, great question. If you have the tech and the capabilities to do so and sort of tailor the experience for different audiences, 100% go for it. That's just always, you know, your goal as a designer is always to create the best experience for each player in your game. And so if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of creating a modular system that creates one experience for one player and another for another, like that's ultimately a win for you. The only potential thing to sort of keep in mind that I'll just raise for you for consideration is if one player sees that they have to defeat 10 enemies and they see that their friend who's on mobile only has to defeat 5, that could create some conflict. So just be very careful of that. But if it's something like you understand, like, hey, for this platforming section, it's a little more difficult for people on mobile, so I'm going to sort of lessen the restraints on that. I think that could ultimately create like a better experience for both of those players.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So I believe that was our last question for this section. So we're going to motor along. So just to reiterate, this is where we are now. We've written down our goals for this feature. And the next step that I like to take is to write down my assumptions. So just to explain why I do this, and we're going to go ahead and type this out now, our assumptions. Why do I write down assumptions? Well, what we're going to be doing today essentially is modeling a player's behavior. And modeling is just a way of saying that we're observing what a player typically does in our game, and then we're sort of creating an experience off of that based off of what we think would be the best experience for them. However, the thing that you have to understand with models is that they're not a perfect science. It's not like whatever I do in Excel is 100% what a player is going to do. As you guys all probably painfully are aware of at this point, players can be unpredictable and they can do things that we don't necessarily anticipate. So that's basically what this section is, you know, whenever I do a balance for a feature, regardless of how beautiful, you know, my spreadsheet looks, when you put it in a game, it's not going to be perfect. And for me personally, whenever I've done a balance of a feature, I've never gotten it on the first try. That's just not an expectation that you should have for yourself. This is constant iteration. It's, I would say, maybe 50% science and 50% art, where the science is the math that we're doing in here and observing our players' behavior. And the art is, after we put it in the game, getting a general feel for it and iterating on it until it kind of creates the optimal experience that we want our players to have. So really, I like to have this here just so that when I do put it in the game and it doesn't operate the way that I anticipated, or I get the feedback from players that it's too hard or too easy, I can sort of use this section to troubleshoot for my players. So there's a few assumptions that I want to write down here, and these just come from experience of balancing a lot of features over the years. The first is at an average player. Oops, this is in bold. Let's not do that. An average player will complete 75% of available missions. So this is the famous pizza analogy that I give you. Your players are not going to play at 100% efficiency every time they play your game. If they are, they're bots and you should ban them. We just naturally are distracted. We don't do things to perfect efficiency. There might be play styles that we have that facilitate that. We're not playing a feature 100% of the time. So the common example I use is a player is playing your game, they're really enjoying it, and suddenly they hear a ding from the kitchen because the oven just went off because their pizza is ready to get. So they get up from their screen and they go over and they get their pizza and they eat lunch while they're still logged into the game, right? So while we pool metrics, which is essentially what I have here under my player profiles of, oh, this person is playing for 14 minutes in a session and, oh, they're playing 3 times a day. They're not actually playing the feature that full 14 minutes. They might only be playing it for 10 minutes, and the other 4 minutes, they're hanging out with their friends in the town square and talking with one another, right? So that's the first big assumption that I like to make, is that a player is only playing about 75% of the time that they're actually logged into the game. The second assumption that I am going to make is that my payers, the people who are paying for this premium track, on average, it's not a hard rule, but on average, are more engaged than non-payers. Really, this is kind of a psychological thing, and I'm not going to pretend to be a psychology professor, but there's something in the brain that when you pay for something, when you have a little bit of investment in it, it immediately has more value for you. So for a player that spent, 400 Robux in a game versus a player that has never spent a Robux, right? The person who has spent 400 Robux on average is going to be more engaged because they have a little bit of skin in the game, right? They're a little bit more invested. So that's something that I keep in mind and anticipate that their behavior is they're just on average going to be more engaged than my non-paying players. Okay. And the final one that I'm going to write down for now is that players will engage during the duration of the feature. So what do I mean by this? Well, I anticipate that for this feature, players that are logged in are going to be engaging with it every day. Part of this is just by design of the feature because it's running in the background. Some players might not actually care about the season pass, but they might actually finish some of the daily missions just by whatever it is that they're engaging in during that day. But my assumption here and what I'm writing out here is that for my players, this is going to be an exciting enough feature that they're going to want to engage with it every day. So when we launch this and we find out that players are only paying attention to it, 50% of the time that they log in, and therefore the feature is way too hard, I can come back here and troubleshoot it and say, oh, okay, that was my point of failure. All right, maybe I need to down tune it or something like that, right? So just to reiterate, I'm not necessarily saying that's what the player behavior is going to be here, but my assumption as I'm building out this is that the player is going to engage with this in some amount every single time that they log into the game. Okay, so there's my goals. There's my assumptions. You notice that we named this the goals, assumptions, and constants tab. So there's only one other thing we need to do here, which is we need to write down our constants. So these are numbers that we're going to be using throughout our sheet. And they're things that are defined by our team as essentially goals that they want to accomplish. So for our scripters out there, you might know where I'm going with this. But for our non-scripters, the reason why we want to write out our constants here is that we're going to be referencing these in formulas later on, basically calculations that we're going to do to sort of balance this feature. And the common best practice in programming, and the same here for a systems designer in Excel sheet, is that you don't want to put hard numbers into your formulas. You want to make references elsewhere. And you'll see why in a minute. Let's just go ahead and write down our constants first. And then I think it'll make a bit more sense as we get on with our formulas. So here, this is essentially going to be a table. So in one column, I want to put the name of my constants. In another column, I want to put what the value is for that. I'm just going to put count down here. And then the third is notes, just notes for myself to make sense for it, because here in these, I'm going to be establishing the count or the value of these constants as whole numbers or integers for our scripters out there, right? And so I can't also put text in that same cell. Otherwise, it will treat it as a text box or a string, again, if you're a programmer and you know that terminology. So few things that are constants here. Let's first, I guess, bold this as our title. First thing from our goals, and you can already see this coming into use, is that this is a 30-day duration feature. So let's go ahead and put down duration as the name of this constant. And the value obviously is 30. And then finally, because I can't put it in that same text box, I'm going to go ahead and put days, right? So the duration of the feature is 30 days. Two things that you're already going to notice here, and this is the same for Sheets as well as Excel, is that if it's an integer or a number, it's going to be formatted on the far right of the cell here. And if it's text, it's going to be on the left. So that's how you know you've done it right. Okay. So now you can already see sort of the value of this as I was talking about before. I want to write down the duration here. And let's say that we're sort of calculating, okay, if they're doing 3 dailies a day over 30 days, that equals, 90 dailies that we want them to do. Well, maybe the team's going to come back to me and they're going to say, you know what, we actually want this to be 45 days. Now, instead of going to every single formula throughout my sheet and erasing the 30 and typing in 45, I can just write 45 here, make a reference to this cell. And whenever I change this cell throughout all of my formulas, those are just going to update with that updated value. So that's why we want to do that. And that's why we don't want to what we call hard code that number into our formula. So you'll see that again later. If that didn't make sense now, we're going to be reiterating on that once we actually get to the balance of our feature. But for now, let's go ahead and continue to populate all of the constants for it. The second one that stands out to me is the number of dailies that our players are going to be doing, right? So number of dailies for each of these. And again, our handy dandy goal sheet, we have that recorded here for ourselves. So for a non-payer, we know that they have 2 missions a day. And again, you should see it formatted to the right. For our payers, right, we know that they are getting 1 additional mission. So that is 3 missions in total. And so again, that is the number of dailies that we have. The last constant that I'm going to record, I'm kind of going to be cheating here. We're going to revisit this once we get to the mission balance, but I'll go ahead and write it down, is that our daily XP is, let's say, 50 on average. Okay, so this might be the most confusing. Don't gather the pitchforks yet. I'll explain why I chose 50. I chose 50 because that number doesn't matter. That number doesn't matter because if you've ever seen any of my other economy talks before, for me as an economy designer, the only thing that matters is the amount of effort, aka time, that goes into a player completing a feature. So this number here, this 50 number, is really for flavor. It's really to show the player, hey, yesterday I completed all my dailies and I earned 150 experience, or I earned 250 experience, right? So whether I grant 100 experience and I have 3 dailies a day, so I earn 300 experience a day, or whether I have 3 dailies a day and I complete and get 150 experience in the case here, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, I'm still doing 3 daily missions that still require the same amount of time. And let's say that the threshold from tier 1 to tier 2 of my season pass is either in this case 150 experience or 300 experience in the other one. Really doesn't matter. We just want a nice round number that looks impressive enough to the player that they feel like they're making meaningful progress, right? But isn't too large or too small that it doesn't really matter, or they can't really make sense of it because what's the point of granting them 10 billion experience if they still need 30 billion experience to get from tier 1 to tier 2? Okay. So that's that. The last thing that I want to teach you here is system designer etiquette. Our goal with this is that we want this to be as readable as possible. So that way, when other members of our team hop in and read it, they can actually immediately have their eyes gravitate towards the important information. So I'm just going to teach you a little bit of sheet formatting for now. What we're going to do is we're going to highlight our sheets. So what you can do is you can click on a cell and drag it over, or you can hold down the Shift key and use the arrow key to move it over to highlight your cells. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the paint bucket. I am colorblind, so I like to use grays or colors that I actually personally understand. But you can make your sheet. I know for a fact that all of you at home can make your sheet look way better than I can. So please feel free to do so. So I'm just going to highlight my, my table title in gray. And then for the rest of this, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put a grid around it. So for me personally, I like to go, so your grid is this little 4 square button here next to the paint bucket. We're going to click on that. I like to make the thickness the second setting here. And then I'm just going to use this outer border section over here to add a grid here, as well as one more here. And then the last thing I like to do is for text that doesn't necessarily matter, I'm going to make that a lighter gray just so my team doesn't visually confuse that for something else. So there you go. That's our goals, assumptions, and constant sheet. I know you guys are probably wondering, okay, this is great. Let's get on to actually balancing the feature. We're about to do that in a minute, but I wanted to open it up. Aaron, Missimo, any questions so far on anything that we've done?
Hey, Dan, we have one question. I bet you can guess who it's from.
CJ.
CJ, you want to try your question?
Hello.
Hi.
But yeah, no, it's relating to that 75-25 rule you had about player and activity and the idea of them getting up and getting pizza. And I was wondering if it'd be beneficial to track player inactivity, because if that's something you could track and possibly put like a little note on any events fired during that time. Or do you feel that would just be overcomplicating things and not really be provide enough benefit to be worth the added layers of complexity in studying that data?
You can. I think it is a bit of the latter of what you said there, where you're kind of over engineering it, because again, this isn't an exact science. You're kind of just trying to approximate it into a certain range where you know the difficulty is kind of right. Maybe it's a little too easy or a little too hard, and you're trying to make those adjustments. You know, as your feature goes along, you're going to get a better idea for what the player engagement actually is. In fact, after your first iteration of the season pass, you literally take a look at completion rates, and then you can balance your feature based off of that the next time. So for this first time, I think it's okay to approximate it. But if you have that data readily available, 100% you can. I've just observed over time, and I have actually tracked that data before, that they typically land around somewhere between 70 to 80% activity for the target group that we're going to be balancing this for, as you saw in a minute, as you're going to see in a minute.
I guess if it's not spoiling too much, is this 75% rule linked to a certain platform? Like, do PC players, if you can get up and bring your phone with you as you get the pizza, that might be different. So is there something?
No, I have seen across the board, it's about 75%.
Okay. Interesting.
Now, it's not like the Bible rule, but just in my history and my experience, it's kind of like when you've been cooking for a long time, you don't measure out the ingredients anymore. You kind of just relatively know. This is kind of one of those things for me. But if you want to pull data on that, yes, 100%. I think that's going to assist you. That's just generally the range that I've seen.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much.
Yep. All right. So moving on, there's a few things that I need to explain before we finally get to actually balancing this feature. You notice there's a lot of tabs in here. What do they all mean? I just want to briefly explain those before we get into the meat of actually balancing the feature. So what I have here is basically a simulation of pulling data from my game of my players' behaviors. So once again, yes, I am going to plug analytics. If you do not have analytics in your game, they are extremely powerful, and they're going to help inform your decisions, as you're going to see here as I'm balancing this feature. So what I have here is a very, very rough average across all games on Roblox, although I can't give you actual data of what player behaviors generally look like. And you're going to see some weird numbers in here. So the first thing I'm going to explain is you see this weird thing here of P30, P50, P60, etc. And all that this means is this is a data analytics term, meaning the 30th percentile, or the P60 is the 60th percentile. And the easiest way that I can explain this is for any piece of data that you're taking a look at, this is just a way that you're slicing up that data. So for session length, for example, when I'm taking a look at the P60 user for session length, all I'm saying is let's pretend that we have 100 players in our game and we line them from 0 or P0 to 100 or P100. When I'm taking a look at the P60 number for session length, I'm taking a look at the specifically 60th user in that line that I lined up from 0 to 100. And I'm saying the 60th longest session length, the person out of 100 who is ranked 60 for session length, what is their session length, right? So this is actually, I said the 60th, this is actually the 40th, right? Because 100 is the highest, 0 is the lowest. So that's an important thing. I'm not saying 60 and above. I'm not saying 60 and below. I'm saying specifically this user. So you can see this engagement just to demonstrate, right, where I pull out the 30th user in this line. They only play for 5 minutes. I pull out the 80th or the 95th person in this line. They're playing for 80 minutes, right? So it's from lowest to highest in terms of data. But this is an important thing to note because I'm only taking a look at one user when I'm doing this. But when I'm modeling, I'm trying to create an experience based off of that player that will benefit everybody relatively close to them in that line of difficulty of whatever that metric is that I'm pulling. So what I have for you here is I have a few numbers that I always like to take a look at as a systems designer. One, my casual player, I'm never really balancing a feature for this player unless that feature is specifically directed at that player. But it's important as a designer that you understand how all of your players are interacting with the system and if this is something that's achievable for them. I also have our most engaged player, so our mega player. So again, I'm not balancing for them either, but I'm trying to understand, you know, how quickly are they going to motor through this experience that I'm creating, right? You always want to know your limits of your experience of who's going to be the first one done. And is it within a day? If it is, we're having a bad time as a systems designer because they already crushed our content. And as we mentioned before, why we like season passes is it paces our players' content because content is king. And when they run out of content, they quit our game, right? The other thing you're going to notice here is I've pulled metrics for both PC players and mobile players. And you're going to notice that there's two different behaviors that you see here, right? For our PC players, they're going to play longer sessions, but they're going to play less sessions a day, right? You can see for our P75 PC user, they're playing for 38 minutes, but they're only playing 5 sessions a day. For our P75, they're playing for 21 minutes, so significantly less than 35, but they're playing 6 sessions. Sometimes I've seen 7 or 8 sessions a day for this kind of user, right? So they're playing more, and that kind of makes sense, right? Because with a phone, you can just pick it up, you can go ahead and play your game for 5 minutes, you can put it down, you can, you know, pay attention to class again, and then 5 minutes later, once you're bored again, you pick up your phone and you play again, right? So that's a very typical behavior that we see from mobile players. But it's important, again, you want to understand all behaviors for all players that are actually playing your game. The other thing you're going to see here is my activity efficiency scores, and this is just my pizza analogy again. So again, I'm going to be using this page for reference as I'm putting together my formulas elsewhere, because again, we never want to hard code behaviors into our system. So let's say 6 months after the season pass launches and I want to rebalance it, I can update my data, my analytics, paste those numbers in here, and all of my formulas elsewhere are just going to update with those updated numbers. Okay, so that is my player profiles page. We're going to come back and reference that later. Moving on, we're going to get started on balancing our feature. And the first thing we're going to do is give you a little Google Sheets / Excel lesson. So there's a few things. If you've never opened up Google Sheets before or spreadsheets scare you, there's a few basics that I'm going to walk through here. And these are some of the common things that I'm going to be using as I'm putting together this. The first thing is how to make a formula. So you noticed before that I had numbers that were formatted to the right, and I was talking about how we're going to use formulas. Well, if you just type in here 1 + 2, right, it's going to treat it as a string or a piece of text, right? So if you actually want to treat something as a formula, the way that you do that, as you're seeing here, is that you type in an equals first, and then you can type in the math that you want to do. So now you can see 1 + 2 = 3. Or in my examples up here, right, where I have 3 divided by 2, and it's going to return 1.5. And if I just write 3 divided by 2, it's going to treat it as a string. So it's very important for all of your formulas that you start it with an equal sign. Okay, the next thing that I want to show you is referencing a cell. So why do we have in our goals, assumptions, and constants all of these numbers here? It's because we're going to be making a reference to them later. So the way that you reference a cell is simple. You type in equals because we're doing a formula, right? And then you just click on the cell that you want to make a reference to. So for example, if I want to reference E6, I click on E6 and then I type in enter. And now you can see this cell is just going to update with whatever I put in here. So you can see I put in 25. Now I put in 100, put in a hello world, right? This one is always going to make a reference to that. Okay, so let's not break everything and let's move on. The next important thing. Okay, so as we're going through this later on, this is the most important piece of information you need to know. If your formula is not working the way that I am, chances are you're not locking a cell reference, and therefore that's what's breaking your formula. So this is a very important one for you to learn. So in Excel, whenever you're using a reference, let's go back and let's use E6 again, or maybe E7, right? We're going to be doing things like dragging formulas down and things like that. And you can see when I drag this down, it's not going to drag down E7. It's going to drag down, you know, whatever is relative to it on that cell. So now you can see now it's referencing E8, E9, E10, etc., right? So the question becomes, well, what if I just want to drag down E7 on all of these cells? Well, there's a way that you can do that in Excel, and that's by adding a $sign for the column and adding a $sign for the row. So you can see in my formulas here, right? This is if you want to completely lock that cell. If you only want the reference to E6 to be there, or in our case, E7, so you can type in those $signs, or I know on PC how to do it, which is you can tap the F4 button. That will automatically lock that cell, right? And now when I drag this cell down, now when I drag this cell down, it's just going to continue to have that reference, right? You can do the same thing where you can lock just the column or just the row. So you can see in these examples here, right? I have this perfectly locked. So if I drag this down, it's going to keep it. If I drag it across, it's going to keep it as a reference to E6, right? But maybe I only want to lock the row, right? So now when I drag it over here, it's going to go F6, G6, right? But if I drag it down, it's going to keep E6 as I drag it. And the same thing for my column here. So you can either completely lock the cell, you can lock the column, or you can lock the row. So that's a very important thing. And if your formulas break later, that's probably why. Okay, next thing are functions. Again, our scripters that are viewing this really have an advantage here because they're like, oh yeah, I know functions. Well, it operates the same way here in a spreadsheet as well. We have certain functions that automate certain things for us so we don't have to manually type it out or program it or anything like that. It's just a reference that we can make. So these perform certain actions based on input parameters. And this is kind of the format here. You have whatever the function name is. You have an open, is it a parentheses? Somebody help me out here. Open, I forgot the word. But yeah, you open it and then you close it with your parameters. So there's a few things here, right? So here I have a round function. So what I type in is equals round. I make a reference to the number that I want to round. In this case, you know, I'm rounding 1.5. And then how many decimal places I want to round it to, right? So in this case, I want 0. So it makes it a whole number. In another case, yeah, we have if statements in spreadsheets, right? So if I want to do a check of, hey, does E8, this number, equal 2? And then I return, if it is 2, I want to return true. And if it's not 2, I want to return false. But you can do other things in here, right? If it is true, right, you could say as a string, hello world, right? And now it's going to return hello world. But if this is 3, it's going to return false, right? So a lot of different things you can do with functions. We're going to go through a few of them that are important in a minute here. The last thing that I want to talk about is dragging a formula. So you saw me do this already. but sometimes we have a formula that we want to carry down throughout, right? Because we have an X value that we're just going to iterate over time. And the way that you do that was how I did before. You have this little square at the bottom right. You'll know if you're on it because your mouse is going to turn into this like target symbol or a plus sign, right? And then you just click down on it and you drag it down. You know that you're doing it right if you have these sort of dotted lines on the column or the cell here, right? So there you go. That's how you drag a formula. All right. The next one, we kind of spoiled it before, but you have the round function. So the round function is just round something to the nearest decimal place that you want, right? So it has two parameters. The first one is the number that you want to round. In this case, I'm rounding 1/3, right? And then the number of decimal places that you want to round it to. So it's important to note that for your functions, and I kind of hopped over this before, but for each of your parameters, you separate them with a comma, right? So the first parameter I have is the number I want to round. I put in a comma, and then the next one is whatever the next parameter is. In this case, the number of decimal places I want to round to. So you can see here, I established I want to round 2 decimal places, 1 decimal place, or 0 decimal places, right? Okay, so hopefully that one is straightforward. This one, if you learn anything today, this is one of the most commonly used functions that I use in Excel, and it's called a VLOOKUP. So what a VLOOKUP does is it searches a table for a specified term, a term that you specify in the first parameter. And then once it finds that value, it returns a value from a column that you specify. So if that's confusing, bear with me. We're going to go through an example right now. So let's say that in my table that I have over here, which is simply just the names of numbers, their value, and how many letters are in the word for that, right? Let's say that I want to look up 3 and I want to return the value for the number of letters that are in that word. Well, this is what a VLOOKUP looks like, right? Where let's just do one down here together. Feel free to type it in with me. So VLOOKUP, right? And one thing to note here, after this, if you're confused, if you want to know what a function does, you see that there's this little pop-up here. You can click on this and it's going to tell you what it is, right? So you're going to have all of your documentation for each of your functions here. And as you can see in here, the first thing that we want to put in is the value that we want to look up. So in this case, for this VLOOKUP that we're doing, we want to look up the word 3, right? So E11. Then we want to type in a comma because we're moving on to our second parameter. The second parameter of a VLOOKUP is that we want to return a table that we're looking up. So in this case, it's this table here. So what I do is I highlight all of these cells here, right? J6 through L10, and then a comma again. So what we're saying is, hey, take this term 3. Then the second parameter is saying, search in this table that I've specified for the word 3. And if you find it, return a value. So that value is going to come from a column, right? So this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. So if you find the word 3 in this table, in this case, if I'm looking up how many letters are in the word 3, I want to return this column here. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So now I'm typing in 3. Return the third column of value here, which hopefully is going to return 5. And then the last thing, just for a fun fact, is you can have this either specify that you want to find the exact term or whatever is the closest to it and return it. For everything we're going to be doing today, we want an exact match. So we only want it to return something if it's found the word 3. So we're just going to put false here, right? Okay, to close a function, you put end parentheses there, and then you hit enter. And now you can see with this VLOOKUP, we looked up 3. Then we said, okay, if you find it, if found it, we're going to go over to the third column. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. And then we returned this value. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing throughout. You can see a second example here where, I looked up, what did I even do here? How did this break? Anyway, yes. So that's how a VLOOKUP works. And we're going to be using that very often today. The final thing that we're going to use is called a data validation. So this is going to format a cell to take a specified range of data. And for the functionality that we're going to use today, all you need to know is we're going to be using it to make these fancy drop-down menus that we're going to be using. You can see them in here where we drop down this menu and then we type in, or then we choose an option from here and it's going to update our list based off of that, right? So that's all you need to know about why we're putting these together. But data validation allows you to put together, to format a cell based on a specified range of data. So the way that you're going to do that is for whatever the cell is that you want to specify that for. In this case, I'm using what, F15. You go up here to data, then you go down here to data validation. So there's a lot of different things that you can do here. For one, you can say, hey, in the example that I show you here, hey, the only things that are valid in this cell are numbers between 10 and 100. So if it's not, return an error. That's what it's doing here. But in our case, the only one we're going to be using today is called list from a range. And so what you need to do is you need to select list from a range if it's not the default option, it should be. And then go over here to this grid, which says select data range. You're going to click on that. And then you're going to highlight the range that you want to pull in for basically what's going to be our drop-down menu of options, right? So what you should see here is J6 to J10. You hit OK, and then you hit save. And now you should see this little arrow here when you select it. Now you can see these different options for what the inputs are. This is just convenient, so you don't have to type in every time one if you want to look up 1 or 2 or 3. You know exactly what's available in that table, and you can just easily pull it. Okay, that was a lot of explaining, and we're about to go on the season balance. But first, Aaron, do we have any questions?
Hey, Dan, we have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Okay, do you want to read yours?
Hello.
Howdy.
Well, yeah, this a lot of good stuff here with the spreadsheets, and they're a very useful tool. However, I was wondering if there's a good rule of thumb for when to actually build these spreadsheets and manually define the best weights for a system versus sort of take the logic you've created inside the spreadsheet and integrate them in the game for real-time balancing.
Yeah, so that's a good question. My workflow is always, I start here and sort of ideating it as a designer. I want to get a general feel here. And then once I'm done, so for example, once I'm done, I have these inputs, be it depending on how you set up your data, right? Of like how much XP you actually need to get to the next tier. And that I can easily just drop in. In fact, a common best practice throughout the industry is this is typically the sheet that I put together for everybody who's hopping in and wants to see what's going on with my system. And sometimes I'll have another sheet that I formatted in a way that can be taken in whatever the scripting language is, right, for that piece of data. And then I can easily export it as like a CSV, a comma separated value, and just import it into there right away, right? So it creates this really easy workflow where once I have this set up, I can make the adjustments that I want. And all I need to do is export those values, import them into the project that I'm working on, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify, my question is more like, is there ever a point where this a system would be fully sort of mapped out and you could almost have weights be changed in the moment? Say you realize that when a game is half full, progression happens at half the speed. Like you could actually have the server check for that and then adjust weights in the moment. Would that be something that, I guess that'd be an instance where I would probably try to automate, but would you say that there's a more general rule of thumb which I can use for the less clear times?
I think it's okay to automate. I think the important thing though is for your team and for yourself. Okay. You should try and make these consistent with one another, because if your actual build and your game doesn't reflect what you have here, there's going to be a lot of confusion for you and your team on like what's actually happening in your game at that point. So it's important that you sort of keep them up to date with one another if you're committing to putting together a balance sheet.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. CJ, keep those great questions coming. All right, we have one more anonymous question.
Okay.
Is it a good idea to lock missions up and only unlock X amount of missions every day? This is so that players don't burn through your content and hopefully help retention.
I'm simply going to answer that as yes. And I'm going to show you how we're doing that coming up. But yes, that is the whole point of the daily mission system, is that they can only make a certain amount. You know, the maximum amount of progress that they can make daily. So you know there's a minimum amount of time that they need to engage with your game that guarantees that they're engaging for that amount of time. And it's a balancing act. It's a balance between how much you want them to actually play and what is the acceptable amount of time that they're willing to play. So you need to sort of find that crossroads. But we're about to get into that. But yes, that's a common mistake that I see with a lot of season passes that are implemented, is they just let you motor through it on day one. And some players, as you're seeing in our player profiles here, right, are going to do that because they play, you know, whatever 11 times 80 minutes is a day, and they play 7 days a week. So they're going to crush your content if you don't pace it otherwise.
Great. Thanks, Dan. That was our last question.
All right. So I promise you we're going to balance the system today. And finally, we can. I've given you the goals and assumptions. I've given you these player profiles, which we're about to use. You have your glossary. So if you're ever lost or confused on what things do, hopefully you can use this as a reference. So now we are ready to balance our actual system. So ultimately, this is what we're going to be creating. And the first thing that we're going to put together is an economy profile. So let's go to our season pass balance document. Again, we're going to create another sheet. Here we go. And we're going to go ahead and move this to the front. So this is our tier balance sheet. And the first thing that we're going to do is balance how many dailies you're going to do and how long it takes to do them to obtain different tiers, starting with this economy profile. So at the end of the day, the way that I'm balancing the difficulty of a system is I'm modeling it after one of my players that I think is going to have the most overlap in terms of their play experience with as wide of an audience as possible. It depends on the goals of your feature. Some features might be targeted at that top 10%. Some might be targeted only at new players. But for something like this, that's going to hit as all of the players in my game, I want to make it as accessible and fun and challenging as possible. So the one thing that you need to know about balancing a feature is that there's two key components. The first is what is the difficulty? You know, how much effort is a player going to have to put into this feature? And so this is what we're going to be modeling now, and then we're going to get to pacing later, and I'll explain that as we get there. But first, we need to put together our economy profile, and there's three key components here: our engagement, our efficiency, and our payer status. So in your document here, we're going to our tier balance tab that we just put together. And in B3 here, I'm going to go ahead and type out economy profile as the header of my first system. And I'm going to go ahead, and the one thing I didn't teach you before, but you can merge cells together. I'm just going to do that here for visibility to make it look nice. So that's this merge cells button here next to our borders. And then I'm going to go ahead and center it and bold it to make it look nice. Again, we want to make our sheets accessible to everybody else. And then there's three components here. First is our engagement. So how much is a player actually playing? What is their effort that they're putting in? The second is the efficiency, our pizza score that we talked about before, right? Of the time that they're actually in our game, how much are they actually playing? And finally, this is an important one. This comes from our goals and assumptions, as we noted before, right? Or in our assumptions, right? Our payers on average are going to be more engaged than our non-payers. And also, they're going to have more quests that they can do and make more progress. So it's important that we differentiate the two in terms of what are we actually balancing our system for. So our payer status is the last one that we want to put in here. So those are our three inputs. And now one of the things that I just taught you on our glossary page is going to come into effect, and that is our data validation. So if you weren't paying attention then, don't worry, I'm going to walk through it step by step again. The first thing that we need to pull in are all of our player profiles. So we're going to select this cell here. This is C4. We're going to go to data. We're going to go to data validation. This menu is going to come up. You should see list from a range. You're going to select data range. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on our player profiles tab down here. And we're going to go ahead and highlight this entire column for A, not including A1, but A2 through A13. Once you selected that, you're going to hit OK. You're going to hit save. And now when we go back to tier balance, you should see this drop-down menu of all of your players. Okay, so for now, I'm going to go ahead and fill this out with our highly engaged players. Because you can see it kind of cuts it off here. There's two ways that you can resize your column here. If you go up here to the top, in between two columns, you should see this like double arrow thing. That indicates that you can sort of stretch this. So you can click it down on it and stretch it out. Or it also has a functionality where if you just double click once you have this double arrow, it should automatically resize it for you. So that's engagement. We have this drop-down menu here. I'm going to set it to our PC highly engaged player for now, even though it's not hooked up to anything else really. We're going to do the same exact thing for efficiency, right? So again, we're going to click on this time C5. We're going to go to data, data validation, list from a range. We're going to select our data range. We're going to go over to our player profiles page again. And this time I want to pull these texts or strings here as my input, right? So you should have player profiles H2 to H6. And then you want to hit OK, hit save. We go back to our tier balance. And now you should see 25, 50, 75, 90, 100. Again, because of my assumptions, I'm going to set this to 75%. Okay. Now, for our payer status, we're going to do something very similar. Again, it's simply just a data validation. We're going to go to data. We're going to go to validation. We're going to select our data range. And this time, we're going to go over to our goals and assumptions, to our constants section here. And these are the two values, non-payer and payer. Maybe you have a system where you have 3 tiers for some reason, right? You have your non-payer, you have your basic pass, and you have your premium pass. I've never seen one of those before, but that would be a reason why you would do that, right? So what you should see here is your goals, assumptions, constants, whatever the values are for this, J5 and J6. We're going to hit OK. We're going to hit save. And there you go. Now you have your payer status. For my feature, I'm going to balance this towards a payer. I'm going to make it slightly more difficult. Rule of thumb for systems design is that you want to sort of roll out the gate with something that you anticipate might be a little more difficult than what the average player wants, because it's always easier to make a feature easier over the span of it actually being live than more difficult, right? No player wants to know that, hey, I can get through at this pace and then log in one day and suddenly everything is harder. That's a poor experience. So we tend to be a bit more conservative with our balance out the gate, because making it easier and having the player log in and see, oh my gosh, this is like way easier, is a nicer experience than if it's too hard. So that's that. And while I format this and make this look nice, I will throw it over to questions from me.
Hey, Dan, we do not have any questions at the moment. So
Dumped them. Awesome.
If you have any questions, please add those to Slido.
All right, then rolling along. We got to keep going because this is a long one. We're going to move on to our second part, which is our economy activity model. So you remember at the beginning, I was talking about how a lot of people think that balancing a feature is very intimidating, very difficult, has complex math. If you take anything away from my talk today, I hope that it's the section that we're about to do demonstrating just how easy it is to actually balance a feature and that anybody can do it. It just takes practice and time. So this is our difficulty here. This is how hard this feature is actually going to be. And you can see as we're going through, and we're about to in a minute, it's really just multiplication, addition, division, right? Things that you learned in what, like 4th grade or something. So very, very simple. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put together our header. So this is our economy activity model. I like to merge it, make it look nice, bold it, center it, all of that good stuff. So there's a few things that we need to calculate here. First is, for our player that we're modeling this after, how many days a week are they actually playing? So if I had to point to one common mistake in any feature that's balanced to where it was made too difficult, it's that the systems designer made the assumption that players are going to be playing for the full duration of the feature. What I mean by that is we know that our season is 30 days long, and they kind of have a slip of mind and think, okay, my players are playing for 30 days. That's not necessarily the case, right? If we go back to our player profiles tab, right? If a player is only playing 1 day a week, or they're only playing 5 days a week, and the duration of our feature is 30 days, that player is not playing for a full 30 days, right? They're only playing 5 out of 7 days a week, or 1 out of 7 days a week. So when we're balancing this after a specific player, we need to figure out, well, how much time is that player actually playing during the duration of this feature? So that's the first thing we're going to do, is we need to figure out how many days per week a player is playing. We have that number. It's over in our player profiles. So we're going to need to pull that data here based on whatever this value is here. So I'm assuming you know where I'm going here. We're using a VLOOKUP for our first time in our balance here. So if you forgot how to do it, no worries. We're going to type in equals to start our formula. We're going to type in VLOOKUP. If you forgot the parameters, feel free to click on this. It's going to go ahead and show you it. So first parameter we need to put in is the value that we're looking up. In this case, we're looking up what is the player that we're actually balancing this after, right? C4, right? So we're going to select C4, which is our player. That way, whenever we drop down that menu and we select a player from it, this cell is just going to populate the data for the days per week that they're playing, right? Okay, so we have our first parameter here, which is C4. We're going to put a comma. So we go to our next value. Our next value, if you recall, is what is the table that we're looking up this value in? Well, we have that. It's over in our player profiles. So go ahead and click on your player profiles. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to highlight from A2. Whoops. Bear with me. We're going to go from A2 all the way down to D13. Oh. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. VLOOKUP. I fat fingered something and broke everything. Okay, so you have C4. Second parameter is our table. We're going to select this table here. So from A2 to D13. Next, we're saying, okay, if you found, in this case, we put P75 engaged PC user here in this, then what we want for this cell is we want to return how many days per week they're playing. So this is 1, 2, 3, the fourth column. So we're going to put a 4 here for this. And then we want it to be an exact match. So we're going to go ahead and put false. So there you go. Your formula should look like this. C4 for our engagement profile that we're pulling it from our table that we have here of A2 to D13. We want to pull the fourth column here as our third parameter. Don't forget your commas in between your parameters. And finally, we want this to be an exact match. So we put in false. All right. So once you have that, we're going to hit enter. And if you go back here, and you selected our P75 highly engaged user, you should be seeing that they're playing 5 days a week, right? And now you can see if we update this, right, it's going to pull whatever that value is. Now you can see for each of these, it's going to pull that value. So you can see the trend we're going to be doing here, right? We're going to be pulling data from other sheets, using it in formulas, and calculating our outcome. All right, so let's go ahead and actually, because 75% of all Roblox players are on mobile devices, I actually want to balance this for the P75 mobile user. That's what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to go with for this. So we know that our mobile player plays 6 days per week. Okay. The other thing that we're going to need to know in order to calculate how many days this player is actually playing is our season duration, right? So we're going to go ahead, type that in. I'm going to resize this real quick. And we're going to go ahead and pull that number. Since that's just a simple constant, I'm going to go ahead and make a cell reference. So this is going to be equal to, we're going to go over to our goals and assumptions and constants tab. Here's my duration here, and I'm going to make a reference to this. So do you remember what I said a little while ago about how we want to put it here? Well, if my team comes in and they say, hey, we actually want this to be 45 days, I simply just update this number. And every formula that you're going to see in here where I calculate duration is just going to automatically update with it. So again, we never want to hard code these values. That's why we're referencing this other tab. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hit enter. What you should see there is 30 days for our duration. Okay, so now we're ready to calculate for this player how many days a week they're actually playing. This is a very simple calculation. Real quick, just double check. I'm making sure I do this right. Okay, so We're going to bold this. And this calculation is going to be equals C10, which is our days, the total duration of this feature, times how many days in a week a player is actually playing, right? So in this case, it's going to be our 6 days that they play a week, C9, divided by, we know that there are 7 days in a week, right? At least at the time of this recording. I don't know what crazy laws are going to come out to change those days a week, but for now it's 7. And there you go. So what you should have here is C10. Then you have this asterisk here. That's how we multiply in Excel. Asterisk means times. And then in parentheses, times, in this case, 6/7 or 6 out of 7 days a week. Once you have that, you should hit enter, and you should see for this player, they're actually only playing 25.7 times a week. So I know that you see this weird fraction of a number here. We're going to leave that for now. In systems design, we never want to round numbers until we get to our final number. If you guys have ever seen Office Space where they like rounded a fraction of the penny and that's how they got caught in trouble, it's the exact same thing here. If you start to round this too early on, you're going to have wildly different numbers than what the number actually should. So always save rounding a number for the very end of your calculations. Okay, so we have the total days that they've played. Now we need to figure out how many dailies they're actually completing in the days that they're playing, right? So we have our dailies available. And again, we're going to use our friend, the VLOOKUP, to figure this out. So you remember up here, we're balancing based off of our payer status. In this case, I'm balancing based off of a payer first. I want to make this slightly more difficult out the bat, just so I can tune it back if it's too hard and I don't get myself in too much trouble. So we're going to go ahead and on cell C12, we're going to hit equals, and then we're going to go VLOOKUP. We're going to go to our reference cell. In this case, it's going to be C6, which is our payer status, comma for our next parameter. We're going to establish the table that we're going to pull from. In this case, it's goals, assumptions, and constants. I'm going to go ahead and establish that it's this table here. So from J5 to L6 as our table, our non-payer and our payer status. However, if you add different statuses in there, make sure that you get that in your table as well. And then what we want to return, you hit comma for our next parameter is our second column here. So that's a 2. And again, we want an exact match. So if you did that correctly, you should see 3 here. You can double check by changing your payer status up here, and it should update to 2 in this case, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The next thing that we need to calculate after that are our dailies that we're completing. Right? So we know the dailies that are available. Now we need to calculate, okay, for this specific player, how many of it are they actually completing in a session? This is where our pizza score is coming in, okay? So this is a simple one. We're simply saying, okay, I'm going to take the dailies that are available and I'm going to multiply it by what is this player's efficiency, right? How efficiently are they playing the game? So again, for this, we're going to be doing a VLOOKUP. Right? So you should do C12 times VLOOKUP. In this case, we're taking a look at our efficiency score, C5. We're going to hit a comma to go to our parameters. We're going to go to our player profiles. We're going to highlight the table that we want. In this case, it's H2 to I6. Okay. And then we're going to specify the column that we want to return once we find it. In this case, it's also 2. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure that it's an exact match. And this is what you should have. You should have C12 times our VLOOKUP of C5, our player profiles of H2 to I6, return the second column and false. Once you have all of that, go ahead and hit enter. And there you go. We anticipate every day that our player is going to complete 2.25 missions. I know that's weird, but maybe some days they complete 3, other days they complete 2. But it's going to average out over the duration of this feature to around 2.25 of those. And that's it. So you saw I just did a few VLOOKUPs. I did a few multiplication, and now we're already ready to calculate the actual difficulty of this feature, right? So how many missions in total am I going to require my player over the duration of the feature to complete in order to actually fully complete this feature? Well, we have all the numbers here that we need, which is simply how many missions they're completing in a day, which is 2.25, right? In this case, C13 is our cell reference, times how many days are they actually playing during this feature, which we calculated up here, right? We know that they're playing 25.71 days. And there you go. We anticipate for this feature that this user that we're modeling our entire feature after is playing about 57.85 missions total. So now that we have that, we can go back to this and you can revisit a formula by either double clicking on the cell like so, or by clicking on this up here to sort of edit it. And now we just want to add in a function here to round it. I showed you that function before, but round. Okay, here's our value in this case. It's C13 times C11. And then the second parameter is how many places. In this case, we want a whole number. So we're going to round it to 0 decimal places. Close the parentheses. You should see here equals round, open parentheses, C13 times C11, comma, and then a 0 for 0 decimal places. We'll go ahead and hit enter. There it is. That's your difficulty for the feature. We figured out how hard we want our feature to be. If at any time, in playtesting, it's too difficult, now we don't need to manually go in and edit any of these formulas anymore. We can simply go up here and say, hey, P75 user was just a little too harsh. I'm going to go ahead and do the P50, and you can see it updates these numbers automatically for me, right? So really my goal as a system designer is I want to build this sheet once and never have to look at it again. Well, look at it again, but never have to edit these nitty gritty numbers again. So that's why we did all of this stuff before to sort of set this up. All right, so real quick, if you notice on this season pass, why I have these different color things. Well, again, this is just for accessibility of other people that are going to be using this. I personally like to use, white cells for things that I want to signify to the team that is editable, right? So you can see in my colors here, like, hey, person on my team, feel free to go in, mess with these numbers. These are okay. And then I like to designate the ones that are formulas as please do not touch, please don't break this because then I'm going to have to go in and fix it. So I like to make them this really ugly yellow color. I also like to make it an ugly yellow color because, I'm red-green colorblind and yellow is the only one that doesn't lie to me. So, I have confidence in this color. So that's why I use it. But, if you're looking at this in horror at how ugly it is, feel free to color code this how you want. Name of the game is just accessibility for your team. So while I answer a few questions, I'm just going to go ahead and format this. Feel free to do so as well. Aaron, do we have any questions?
We do have 2 questions. The first is anonymous. Are there any types of games where you wouldn't want to implement a season pass?
Well, that's the nice thing about a season pass is it's really just a system that goes over the meta part of the game. And as you'll see when we do the mission balance, you can really tailor it to whatever style of game you have. Maybe in a shooter, for example, the daily missions that you have are like win 1 game, right? Versus an RPG where it's like, win defeat 10 monsters or something, right? So really you can tailor it to the style of game that you have. I wouldn't say that 100% for sure you can just jam this into every game that's out there. I just personally don't have an example that comes to mind where a season pass wouldn't necessarily work because it's really just encouraging them to engage in the core loop and in the gameplay and then rewarding them for it with this sort of meta system that you update over time.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very versatile system that can touch all of your systems, and that's beneficial for pretty much any game. All right, CJ, you're up.
He's back.
Hello again. Well, yeah, this one's more of, I guess, a slightly more open question than I guess I usually do, of just what are some good tips for integrating A/B testing more directly into this? Because in the past, I've used A/B testing a lot to try to get the game's performance levels at different preset areas, but I've noticed that this spreadsheet seems to very much focus on modeling for one specific configuration. Do you have any techniques for showing between them?
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is a workflow for a brand new feature that I'm just starting out on, that I don't have data specifically for. Once this feature is out, I can start iterating on it by taking a look at data specific to this feature. So one of the sections we didn't really cover in our design document is one of what are the analytics hooks that I would put up to this. So there's a few that I would take a look at. One is, how many tiers are players achieving? What percentage of users have actually completed this entire feature? What percentage of users reached, tier 7 versus tier 4, right? To give me a relative idea of what players are actually doing with this feature. Another one I would look up is, how many average dailies are players completing, right? Those are the kinds of things that once this feature is live and I actually see what they're doing, I can just fine tune this to be as close to the experience that players are actually doing as possible. And that's really the compelling power of analytics, is that rather than doing, modeling and some guesswork here of what you anticipate your players are doing, specifically how your players are behaving in that system. The second part of your question, A/B testing, is if you have the resources to do so, you can certainly custom tailor this experience to all of your players, to where your P90 player is getting, one experience of like 68 missions they need to complete, and your hyper casual player is getting 10, as an example. Again, remember what I said earlier, where like, how explicit are you with these different balances and sort of the player outrage to that? You have to be very careful of that. But those are sort of things that you can like A/B test and also modify. But the name of the game and kind of the common thread of everything I'm saying is, this is just the starting line. This is not the finish line of balancing a feature. You can always iterate and improve a feature over time, not just in the balance that you're doing, but also, if you recall, in our design document here, in iterating on the experience itself. So these are just constantly evolving and improving features over time. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
And that was our last question.
All right, we are critically over time here, so I need to speed it up a bit. Okay, so we have our difficulty. Now we need to figure out our pacing. So pacing is the rate at which a player consumes and achieves within a system. And this is a very important thing. And let me demonstrate why. So you can see here, I have this curve. Never mind, I'll explain it to you later. But here's a linear system, or close to a linear system, of how you would balance, right? And so this is the column that I want you to focus on for what I'm talking about. When you have a linear system, you're creating, behind the scenes kind of this monotonous experience where a player just needs to achieve the same thing over and over again in order to earn rewards, in order to make progress on a feature. There's a reason why we use a curve frequently in systems design versus a linear system. There is a place for a linear system, but this is a good demonstration here. There's a few things that you can see here. One is that the pace at which a player progresses can get monotonous over time. It can feel like, okay, I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? Versus, when you have a curve, right, you can see now I make progress faster earlier on, and then my progress slows later on, right? So for a new user, you can make it such that they can get into the meat of the experience and they can get those moments of joy sooner. And then for a more engaged user, now that they understand the system, right, there's a lot more engagement that's required in order to achieve, but also that time that it takes to achieve something makes that reward more rewarding for the player, right, versus just a linear system. So those are sort of like the two reasons why we pace things the way that we do. Are there any questions on that? That's a pretty important concept that I want to make sure everybody understands the reasoning behind. Okay, well, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. So here is probably the number one reason why a lot of people think that systems design is complicated or difficult or unapproachable. And it's because you see crazy formulas like this. Well, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from my talk today, it's that you really don't need to over-engineer the math that you're doing in a sheet in order to create a good experience for your players. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So here is a curve that I put together that is literally just an exponential curve, right? The formula here is 0.18x to the 2.5. You can have something as simple as this, and as long as you have this curve, and as long as you're creating a paced experience for your player, as I just said, who cares what the formula is behind the scenes? You know what it is, but others don't. The reason why I put together a curve generator for you today is it's just convenient. And the other thing is, you know, with an exponential formula, you notice, like if we change our player behavior to a P60, now I have to manually modify these things in order to sort of like find the number that actually works. So just for our convenience today and what we're doing, I put together a nice curve generator for you where you guys will hopefully only have to edit a single number, and then you'll get the result that you want. So we're going to move on. We're going to now build out our pacing for our feature. Oops, this is the wrong tab. We're going to build out this pacing for our feature. And so the thing that I'm going to need you to do is we're finally going to get to the curve generator tab that I also sent you here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to select from E3 over here. We're going to drag it all the way over to O3 and then all the way down to O13, right? So you should now have highlighted E3 over to O13. We're going to copy this and we're going to go, once you have copied it, we're going to go over to our tier balance and we're going to go ahead and select E3 here. And we're going to go ahead and paste this. Okay, so I've given you the beginnings of our curve generator. So there's a few handy dandy things that you're going to need to know for this tool that I put together for you. This beginning input here is simply where your curve begins because all of our players are starting at 0 XP. I'm just going to leave this at 0 XP. Okay, the second thing is where this curve ends. So this is basically where our difficulty comes in, right? Because we know in the case of this system that we put together, oops, I'll go ahead and put this back to our mobile highly engaged user, 75% average in our payer. We know that we want them to complete 58 missions in total in order to complete this. So we have that number. So this is the end of our curve that we're doing. So this is going to be equal to this 58. We're just going to make this cell reference here of equals C14. We're going to go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so there you go. Now this curve generator should have generated this for you. Don't worry about these. These are just pieces of math. But what you should see here is that we have our mission total that was just generated for us. So what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and highlight from E4 to F13. And this is just a way that we can visually see what is going on. We're going to go ahead and we're going to say insert. We're going to go to chart. And we're going to create a chart for our tier. Okay. So you should have a line chart for this. If you have a bar chart like this, go ahead and select our line chart. We're going to exit out of that. We're going to drag this over to give us some room to operate. And I'm just going to make this our mission total, what this is called for this. Okay. So you should have that. The other component of this is our curve, AKA our pacing. So this is just a very useful number that you can use. So if you want a steeper curve, you just put in a higher number. You can see here, as I put in a higher number, this pacing is going to change. For our benefit here, I'm just going to put this at 2. I think that this is a pretty decent pacing for the system. But, you know, as you're iterating and as you're playing, you might be like, okay, it's too grindy early on, or it's too easy early on. This nice curve generator here, you can just update to update for that. Okay, so that is our pacing on paper balanced conveniently with a curve generator. What I like to do, and the power of a spreadsheet, is that you can slice this data up into ways that help you understand what's going on in your system. And also, depending on your data implementation, you might need other information that you're going to copy and paste into your game for it. So a few things we need to know here. First is, what is the XP total that they're going to need, right, in order to complete this? Because you remember the way that we complete dailies is that they're going to grant experience. And this is a very simple number. So this is simply just equal to the number of missions that they need to do times how much XP they get per mission. So that we're going to go over to our goals, assumptions, and constants. And here's that arbitrary number I chose before. Okay, so this should be equal to 0, obviously, because 0 times 50 equals 0. And then we're just going to go ahead and drag this formula down, which is not working for some reason. Aha! See, I told you, if your formula is not working, you know why, which is we didn't lock this cell in our goals, assumptions, and constants. So there you go. You should have a $sign before K, and you should have a $sign before 7 of this. Go ahead and hit enter again. Go ahead and drag this formula down. And now you should see that that K7 should be locked in place throughout for our XP total. A few other things that I want to slice up here. First is our missions per tier. So how many missions do they actually need from tiers 1 to tier 2? How many missions from tier 2 to tier 3 do they need, right? So there's a very simple formula that we can put together here. Again, our scripters should be delighted because we have something very similar to the work that you guys do, which is that I'm going to go ahead and put in an error handling. Well, actually, let's go ahead and put this in first, and then I'll explain what happens. So obviously, to find out our missions per tier, we just need to find the difference between the missions. So for example, to find the number of missions that I need to do between tier 9 and tier 10, I'm simply taking tier 10 minus tier 9, and that's how many missions in total I actually need to do, right? So we can go ahead and we can drag this formula all the way up, and you can see here we have an issue here, and that is because we're trying to subtract 0 minus a string, which Excel or our spreadsheet doesn't know what to do with. So now we can simply add in an error handling function here. So if error, so if this value returns an error, then I'm just going to have it return 0 in this case. And there we go. So we'll just drag that down, make sure everything has our error handling. So that's one component. We can do the same thing for our XP per tier as well. Okay, so we're just going to do equals if error, and then we're going to take our current value minus our previous value. We're going to have it return 0 if it's an error. I don't know why that happened. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to drag this all the way down. Oh, I did it wrong. Okay, so this is actually G for our XP values. And then we'll go ahead and drag that down. So there you go. That's our XP per tier. And then you can see there's like other things that we can do, right? So in my finalized version, I have here like how many days do they need to sort of operate per tier in order to progress, right? So in this case, you know, from tier 1 to tier 2 is close to a day. And from tier 9 to 10 is actually 6.2 days that they're going to need to engage with this, right? So already on paper, you can kind of see the sort of pacing and experience that's going to occur for your players in your game. And that is generally it, right? So other than formatting this and other than maybe slicing the data in different ways to help us understand different things, this is really your balance for your feature, or your first pass for your balance for your feature. Now you can do things like you can take you know, the actual balance of the feature, you can put it into your game, you can play through it as each of your different players, and you can get an understanding for how they're going to experience it. You can launch your feature, have players play it, and based on their feedback, you can modify your tuning of this feature. Or you can pull data, as I discussed with CJ earlier, and you can further iterate and refine the experience that you're creating. So while I make this sheet nice and pretty, do we have any other questions?
Hey, Dan, we do not.
Stumped them. Okay. All right. Well, that's good because we got to keep rolling. We got a lot going on. I'm going to go ahead and make this our ugly yellow color to notify my team that they should not touch these formulas. Okay. So we balance the actual tier balance for the feature, but what about the missions themselves? How do we actually balance that and create a good experience for our players? Well, as you always hear me say, the answer always comes back to time. Time is what's most important. We want our players to be able to complete whatever missions we put in front of them in the amount of time that they're actually playing the game. So I'm going to go ahead and make another sheet. So we're going to add a sheet. We're going to go to mission balance. Okay. So we're going to do something very similar here, which is that first we're going to set up an economy profile. So I'm going to sort of laser through this one because hopefully we've done it enough that everybody knows. So we're going to go ahead and center this, bold it, put it in the center here. We need our engagement, our efficiency, and our payer status for our balance. Okay, then we need to do a data validation. So for engagement, we're going to go to data. We're going to go to data validation, list from a range. We're going to select a range. We're going to go over here to this player profile of A2 to A13. We're going to hit OK. We're going to hit save. Okay, so you should have this now. And then our efficiency, same thing. Data, data validation, select data from a range. Go to our player profiles. We're going to select our efficiency score, H2 to H6. Hit OK, hit save. Okay. We're going to go ahead and give them our pizza math. And then finally, for our payer status, data, data validation, select from a range, goals, assumptions, and constants. We're going to go non-payer and payer. We're going to hit OK. We're going to hit save. OK, we have this. We're going to go ahead and format it and make it nice. Maybe for some of you, have you catch up while I do this, because we are running out of time, unfortunately. Okay, so this and this. Okay. Okay, so now we need to balance our mission. So I'm going to go ahead, merge and center, bold, center it. Okay, so there's a few things that we need. My goal always as a systems designer is, unless it's the explicit goal of the feature that this takes up 100% of a player's time, is I want to consider how much time they actually should be engaging with this feature. What percentage of their playtime? Nobody wants to log in and feel like they're doing a laundry list of tasks and that's what they're doing every day, because over time, your players are going to feel like it's a job to actually play your game. So with this feature too, I don't want it to be I want it to be non-intrusive. I don't want it to take up my players' playtime. I want them to be socializing with other players. I want them to be engaging in the systems that they want to. I don't want the season pass to be 100% of the time that they're playing. So this is an input that you can modify, and you should modify, and you should consider as you're playing as to whether or not this feature is consuming too much player time and attention or not. And this is player consumption. So I'm just going to make this a percentage. This cell we're going to keep white because this is one that people are going to modify over time to create the experience that they want. Okay. So there's a few things that we need to consider here, which is how much time does a player actually have in a day, right? We're balancing our players' daily behavior. So that's the input that we need to calculate, which is their total play time. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and bold these. And this is a simple calculation because in our player profiles, we know how much they're playing in a single session, right? So a single session is from the time they log in to the time they log out. And then we also know how many sessions they're playing in a day. So it's a simple multiplication of, in the example of our P30 casual user, that they play 5-minute sessions and they play 2 sessions a day. So we know that they play 10 minutes in total. So that's what we're going to calculate here. But of course, we have to use our handy dandy VLOOKUPs to do so. So go ahead, type in our VLOOKUP. We're going to look up our engagement value. We're going to go ahead and we're going to specify that the range is this entire table again of A2 to D13. In this case, the first one, it doesn't really matter which order you do it in, but we're going to return our session length. So that's column 2. And then finally, we want an exact match. So there you go. So C4, our player profiles, A2 to D13. Column 2, return false. That's one of them. If you want to sort of debug this or make sure that you did it right, go ahead and hit OK. If you chose your average player like mine, you should see that it's 14 as theirs. So that's great. All right. Then we need to multiply it times the amount of sessions they're playing per day. So again, we're going to do another VLOOKUP in this formula. We're going to go ahead and select our player profile. we're going to go ahead and highlight that same range of information. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and select this time the third column, which is, oh dear. Yeah, the third column, which is the sessions that they play per day. Please leave. Yeah, our sessions that they play per day. Then we're going to go ahead and hit false. And there you go. So now you should see that their playtime is 42, right? Because for our average player, they're playing 14-minute sessions, 3 sessions a day. So they're playing 42 minutes in total during the day, right? So there you go. We have our total playtime for a single day. Now we need to consider, okay, so how much of that time should they actually be doing missions or dailies for our season pass? That's a very easy calculation, right? Mission time total. Okay, so this is simply our 42 minutes that they have in total times the amount of playtime that we actually want them to do, which in this case is 50%. Maybe you want it to be 25% of their time. Maybe you want it to be 75% of your time. This is really where like the art of design comes in, and you're trying to think about, as a designer, what is the player's experience that you're creating? Okay, so we have their mission time total. Now we need to figure out, okay, so we know in total how much time we want them to be engaging with this feature daily, but we have, in the case of our payers, 3 different missions that they're doing each day. So we need to calculate for each of the missions what that is. And that's very obviously the mission time that you have divided by how many missions they have. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fill that out as well. Missions available. And again, we're going to use our VLOOKUP for this. Oops, we never chose our payer as our profile. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, okay, so VLOOKUP, our payer status, which is C6, times our goals, assumptions, and constants, which is our payer. And then, these tables here. So J5 to K6, we want to return our count, which is our second column 2, and we want an exact match. So here you go. We want to look up C6, goals and assumptions, constants, J5 through K6. We want our second column, and then we want it to be an exact match. Go ahead and hit enter, and you should obviously see 3 for this. And then it's just a simple multiplication, right? Oh, wait, sorry. I skipped over one last thing, which is our pizza math, right? So we know how many, we need to calculate again, how many missions we anticipate that they're completing in this case, right? Which was that 2.25 number again. So we're just going to calculate that again for this page. So this is going to be equal to this number, C13 times our VLOOKUP, which is our efficiency score. Go to our player profiles, select this value again, H2 to I6, select the second column, make sure it's an exact match. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and do that. And now we do our multiplication or our division. So target mission time. Okay. So this is simply the mission time total divided by this here, which is the amount of missions that we anticipate that they're going to complete. And there you go. When you're balancing your dailies, you really want to figure out, okay, so if I'm telling them to kill monsters as a daily quest, how many monsters can they possibly kill in 9.3333 minutes, right? And that's how you want to balance that feature, right? So that might take some manual testing from you. You go into your game, you defeat a bunch of skeletons, you sort of stop at 9.3 minutes, and then you take a look at, okay, how many skeletons did I kill in that time? And that's sort of how you balance that one mission for that feature. And there you go. You've generally balanced your mission balance. Now the responsibility is on our content designer, Erin, to go into the game, figure out all of the tasks that she wants our players to do that touch all the different systems in our game, and then balance it towards it. Okay, so I will go ahead and answer questions while I format.
All right, Dan, we have no questions.
Stumped him yet again. All right, well, we are critically out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and just the last thing that I want to talk about is the elephant in the room, which is, remember how we just YOLO'd this 50 number into there? Well, if you recall in our goals and assumptions, the document said that there are easy, medium, and hard missions. Now, if your missions are going to show up at a similar frequency to one another, then if you make your easy missions 25 experience and you make your hard missions 75 and you make your medium 50, it's going to average out to 50. However, that might not be what teams want to do. So the last tip and trick that I am going to show you today is what is called a weighted average. And I'll explain that in a minute. Let me just go ahead and put together this table. So we have our difficulties here of easy, medium, and hard, right? Go ahead and bold those. And then we have the XP that's rewarded for each of them. And then the frequency through which players are going to see that daily, right? So maybe you actually have a frequency where easy missions pop up, 40% of the time, and hard missions only show up 5% of the time, and medium show up 55% of the time. But we'll go ahead and put in our data based on my example before. So let's say that our easy missions give 25 experience and they show up, 1/3 of the time. I'm just going to do that for simplicity, right? Because it's split evenly among the three. So if you don't remember what a weighted average is, we need to figure out, okay, based on their frequency and the amount that they reward, what is the total amount that I should expect? So the math for this is that you can do 25 times 1/3 and then 50 times 1/3 and 75 times 1/3. And then you can find the sum of this, right? And that's going to give you your total. Well, Excel or spreadsheets are going to give you a very easy function that you can also use without having to do 3 separate pieces of math for it. It's called sum product, right? Sum product, which you take one column as parameter 1 and one column as parameter 2. And that's going to output your weighted average. So now your team can go in and do some of the stuff I was talking about before, where your easy mission is going to show up 40% of the time, your medium is going to show up 55% of the time, and your hard is going to show up, 5% of the time. And that's going to give you what your average experience is. Maybe your hard mission gives 150 because it's so rare, etc. So you can mess with those numbers over time. That's the last thing that I wanted to show. If you are going to, vary it up and vary your frequency, feel free to do so. Just remember to change your reference in your original sheet from this times 50 from our goals and assumptions to whatever you land on for your average experience here. And with that, we are out of time. Happy to answer any questions that we have, but thanks for joining me today. And I hope that you learned a few things. And I hope that you got some insights into just how approachable systems design actually is.